The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, pressing down on everyone inside. The woman stood there, her hands trembling, her eyes red and swollen. She had no words left to say. Judge Thomas looked down at her from his bench. His voice was firm but gentle. "Ma'am, you failed to pay your fine. Do you understand the seriousness of this?" She nodded slowly, her lips quivering, but she said nothing. The judge sighed. He flipped through the papers in front of him, glancing back up at her. "You have been given several notices. Yet, you did not pay. Is there any reason why?" She swallowed hard, and then, in a broken voice, she whispered, "I lost my son." The air in the courtroom changed. The tension, the judgment, the harshness, it all softened. Even those in the audience, who had been waiting for their own cases, sat up straighter. Some gasped, others lowered their eyes. Judge Thomas leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Your son?" His voice, once firm, now carried something else, something almost like pain. Tears spilled down the woman's face as she nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. My son is gone, and I forgot about everything else. I forgot about the fine. I forgot about everything." For a long moment, there was silence again. Then, finally, the judge took a deep breath. What he said next would shake the entire courtroom. It was something no one expected. "I'm going to do something that has never been done before," he said. The woman lifted her head, her breath hitching. Everyone in the courtroom leaned in. What was he going to do? A few months earlier, life had been very different for Hannah Whitmore. She had been a simple woman, working hard, taking care of her son, making ends meet the best she could. She wasn't rich, but she wasn't poor either. She was just surviving. Her son, Caleb, was her everything. He was 10 years old, full of energy, full of laughter. They lived in a small apartment on the west side of town. Every morning, she would wake up early, make him breakfast, and walk him to the school bus. It was their little routine. Caleb loved soccer. He would always kick his ball around in their tiny backyard, pretending he was a famous player. "Mom, one day, I'm going to be the best player in the world," he'd say. And she would always smile and say, "I believe you, sweetheart." But life had a way of changing things when you least expected it. It started with something small, something that didn't seem important at the time. One evening, after a long shift at the diner where she worked, Hannah was driving home when she saw flashing lights behind her. A police officer pulled her over. "Ma'am, you were going 10 miles over the speed limit," the officer said. Hannah was exhausted. She had been working extra hours to save up for Caleb's soccer camp. I'm sorry, officer. I wasn't paying attention." The officer sighed and wrote her a ticket. $250 fine. "You have 30 days to pay." She took the paper with shaky hands. Money was already tight. How was she going to find an extra $250? She planned to pay it. She really did. But then, everything changed. 2 weeks later, she got the phone call. A car accident. A drunk driver. Her son was gone. Her world shattered. She stopped going to work. She stopped eating. She stopped caring about anything. Bills piled up. Notices came in the mail, but she didn't open them. She didn't even remember the fine. Until the day a knock came at her door. It was a court summons. She was being ordered to appear before a judge for failure to pay. She barely even reacted. What did it matter? What did anything matter? And now, here she was, standing before Judge Thomas, broken, lost, drowning in grief. The judge studied her. He was a man who had seen all kinds of cases in his courtroom. Thieves, criminals, reckless drivers, people who simply didn't care. But this woman, she was different. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't someone who had ignored the law out of arrogance. She was a mother who had lost everything. Judge Thomas tapped his fingers against his desk, deep in thought. He looked at her again, his eyes softer now. Then, he spoke the words that no one expected. "Hannah Whitmore, I am going to do something today that is not written in any law book. Something that doesn't happen in this courtroom often." The audience held their breath. Hannah lifted her tear-streaked face. The judge leaned forward. "I am going to make a decision that will not only change your life, but the life of everyone listening today." The room was frozen. No one moved. And then, He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say another word, the courtroom doors suddenly burst open. Everyone turned. A man rushed in, looking frantic. His face was pale, his eyes wild with panic. "Wait!" he shouted. "Stop everything!" Hannah gasped. The judge's gavel hovered in the air. The room erupted in whispers. Who was this man? And why did he look like he was about to say something that would change everything? The tension in the courtroom became unbearable. Every eye turned toward the man who had just burst through the doors. He was out of breath, his hands shaking at his sides. Judge Thomas narrowed his eyes, his grip tightening on the gavel. "Sir, who are you? And why are you interrupting my courtroom?" The man swallowed hard, looking around as if searching for the right words. Then, his eyes landed on Hannah. His face was filled with something between urgency and sorrow. I have information," he stammered. Hannah's heart pounded in her chest. Information? About what? The judge's patience was wearing thin. "This is highly irregular. If you don't have a legal reason to be here—" "I do," the man interrupted, his voice cracking. "Please, Your Honor. It's about her son." The room gasped. Hannah's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Her son? For months, she had drowned in grief. She had buried him. She had woken up every day with an ache so deep she thought she would never feel whole again. And now, someone was standing in this courtroom, talking about her son as if— No, it wasn't possible. She gripped the wooden table in front of her, her breathing uneven. What do you mean?" she whispered. The man hesitated, shifting nervously under the weight of so many stares. His throat bobbed as he swallowed again. "I work at the hospital. I was on duty the night of the accident." Judge Thomas frowned. "What are you trying to say?" The man's hands balled into fists. There was a mix-up. Another wave of gasps rippled through the courtroom. Hannah felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her. A mix-up? The judge, usually composed and in control, leaned forward. His voice was sharp, demanding. "Explain yourself. Now." The man ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling to get the words out. I can't say everything here," he admitted. "Not yet. But, Your Honor, I swear to you, something happened that night. And this woman," he gestured toward Hannah. "She needs to know the truth." Hannah's fingers curled against the wood of the table, her nails digging in. "Are you saying—" Her voice broke. "Are you saying my son?" She couldn't finish the sentence, because she was too afraid of the answer. The judge stared at the man for a long moment. His gaze was unreadable, calculating. Then, finally, he exhaled through his nose. "Bailiff," he said. The officer standing at the side of the room stepped forward. "Yes, Your Honor. Take this man into my chambers. I want a full explanation." "Yes, sir." The man hesitated, throwing one last glance at Hannah before following the bailiff out of the room. And just like that, the courtroom was left in stunned silence. Judge Thomas turned back to Hannah, who was visibly trembling. "Ms. Whitmore, I don't know what's going on here," he admitted. "But I promise you, we will get to the bottom of it." Hannah's lips parted, but she couldn't speak, couldn't think, could barely breathe. What if? No, she couldn't let herself hope. She had learned the hard way that hope could be the cruelest thing of all. But the thought wouldn't leave her mind. What if Caleb was alive? 3 months earlier, it had been raining that night. Hannah had been folding laundry when her phone rang. The moment she saw the unknown number on the screen, something inside her twisted. She almost didn't answer, but she did. And in that moment, her world fell apart. "There's been an accident," the voice on the other end said. Everything after that had been a blur. The frantic drive to the hospital, the sterile smell of the hallways, the doctor's somber face as he led her into a cold, gray room. And there, on the bed, covered in white sheets, she had collapsed. The funeral happened too fast. She barely remembered it. People came. They whispered words of sympathy. They hugged her. But she wasn't there. Not really. She had been buried alongside her son. For weeks, she had lived in a fog. The outside world didn't matter. Until today. Until now. And suddenly, there was a crack in the fog. A sliver of light, of possibility. But what if it was false hope? What if it broke her all over again? She sat there, her fingers gripping the fabric of her shirt, staring at the door where the man had disappeared. Waiting for an answer she wasn't sure she could handle. And then, the door to the judge's chambers opened. The man stepped out. His face was pale, and the next words out of his mouth changed everything. The man stepped out of the judge's chambers, his face pale, his hands shaking. The entire courtroom was silent, waiting. Hannah felt her heartbeat in her throat. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Well?" he said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. The man took a deep breath, his gaze locked onto Hannah. "Ms. Whitmore, I don't know how to say this, but—" He hesitated, looking down, almost afraid to meet her eyes. "Say it," Judge Thomas commanded. The man looked up. "The child in that accident," he started. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "May not have been your son." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Hannah felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man swallowed hard. "There was a mistake at the hospital that night. The bodies, they were mixed up. The boy you buried." His voice cracked. "There's a chance he wasn't Caleb." The world tilted. The sounds in the courtroom faded into nothing but a dull ringing in her ears. No, this couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of cruel joke. Hannah's knees buckled. She grabbed the table to keep herself from falling. Judge Thomas leaned forward. "Do you have proof of this claim?" The man exhaled sharply. "Not yet," he admitted. "But I remember that night. The hospital was overwhelmed. There were multiple victims from different accidents brought in at the same time. And I overheard something. Something that didn't sit right with me." Hannah's chest heaved. "What did you hear?" The man hesitated. "A nurse." She was panicked. She kept saying, "We mixed them up. Oh God, we mixed them up." Hannah's hands flew to her mouth. Judge Thomas looked at him carefully. "And you didn't say anything then?" I was new. I didn't know what she meant at the time," the man said, his voice filled with guilt. "And when I finally put it together, I didn't know what to do. I thought it was too late." Tears streamed down Hannah's face. "Then why now? Why are you telling me this now?" The man exhaled shakily. "Because I finally found out where the other child was taken. And Ms. Whitmore," he swallowed hard, "I think Caleb is alive." The courtroom erupted. People gasped. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Hannah felt like she couldn't breathe. Judge Thomas slammed his gavel. "Order." The room fell silent again. Hannah felt herself trembling uncontrollably. "Where is he?" she whispered. The man hesitated. I don't know exactly, but I found something. A report. A child was admitted that night. Same age, same injuries, but he was transferred to a different facility." Judge Thomas's eyes darkened. "And no one thought to question this?" The man shook his head. "That's the thing. The child had no identification when he was transferred. No name. Just a John Doe." Hannah's breath came in short, shallow gasps. "Where was he taken?" The man bit his lip. "To a private care facility. A place that treats coma patients." The words hit Hannah like a punch to the gut. Coma. Was her son in a coma all this time? While she mourned him? While she fell apart? While she thought he was gone forever? Her head spun. She felt like she might pass out. The judge looked at the man with a steely gaze. "What is the name of this facility?" The man licked his lips, his hands fidgeting. "The Lexington Rehabilitation Center," he finally said. Hannah's entire body stiffened. She knew that name. It was on the other side of town. A private facility. One she had never even thought about before. And if what this man was saying was true, if Caleb was there, then all this time, her son had been just miles away from her, alive, and waiting. Hannah's legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor. People rushed toward her, but she barely noticed. The only thing she could hear was the man's voice, echoing over and over in her mind. "I think Caleb is alive." Judge Thomas banged his gavel again. "This court is adjourned." But Hannah was already gone, because she had only one thought in her mind now. She had to get to the Lexington Rehabilitation Center, and she had to find out the truth, because if her son was alive, she would never forgive herself for not knowing. Hannah ran. She didn't wait for the court to clear. She didn't hear the voices calling after her. She barely noticed the tears streaming down her face. All she knew was that she had to go. Her heart pounded as she pushed through the courthouse doors and stumbled onto the sidewalk. The world outside felt too bright, too loud. Cars honked, people walked past, unaware that her entire life had just been turned upside down. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. Her fingers were unsteady as she typed into the GPS. Lexington Rehabilitation Center. A pin dropped on the screen. 15 miles away. 15 miles. Her breath hitched. Caleb, if he was really there, had been only 15 miles away all this time. She flagged down the first taxi she saw. Lexington Rehabilitation Center, she gasped, sliding into the back seat. Please hurry. The driver glanced at her through the mirror, probably noticing how pale she was, how frantic her voice sounded. He nodded and pulled into traffic. The drive felt endless. Her mind raced. She tried to prepare herself, but how could she? What if the man was wrong? What if this was just some horrible mistake? But what if he wasn't? What if Caleb was there? Alive, breathing, waiting? Her hands curled into fists. If he was there, she would never let him out of her sight again. She would never let anyone take him from her. The taxi screeched to a stop in front of a tall, white building with iron gates. Lexington Rehabilitation Center. She threw a handful of bills at the driver and bolted out of the car. Her heart was hammering against her ribs as she pushed through the front doors. The lobby was quiet, pristine. A receptionist looked up, startled by her sudden entrance. "Ma'am, can I help you?" Hannah's breath came in short gasps. I'm looking for a patient. A young boy." The receptionist frowned. "Do you have a name?" Hannah hesitated. What if he was still listed as John Doe? She gritted her teeth. "Please. There was a child brought here months ago. Around 10 years old. A coma patient." The woman hesitated. "I'm sorry, but we can't release patient information without authorization." Hannah slammed her hands on the desk. "Listen to me," she said, her voice breaking. "My son was in an accident. They told me he was dead. But I think he's here." The receptionist's eyes softened. "Ma'am, I understand, but I need—" "Please," Hannah begged, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Just tell me if there's a boy here. A boy who came in without a name." The receptionist hesitated, then glanced at her computer screen. She typed something quickly. Hannah held her breath. The woman's eyes flickered with something. Recognition, maybe shock. Her lips parted slightly. And then, a voice interrupted from behind them. "Ms. Whitmore?" Hannah spun around. A doctor stood there, dressed in a white coat, a clipboard in hand. His face was unreadable. "Please," Hannah whispered. "Tell me." The doctor took a deep breath. And then, "I think you should come with me." The walk down the hallway felt endless. Hannah's legs felt weak, her breath unsteady. The doctor said nothing as they moved past door after door. The walls too white, the air too sterile. Finally, he stopped in front of a room. Room 214. He turned to her. "Before we go in, I need to prepare you." Hannah's hands clenched at her sides. "Just tell me the truth." The doctor exhaled. "The boy who was brought here suffered a head injury. He was in a coma for weeks. But recently, there have been signs of improvement." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Improvement?" The doctor nodded. "Yes. A few days ago, he started moving his fingers. Yesterday, he opened his eyes for the first time." Hannah's hands flew to her mouth. "But," the doctor continued, "he's confused, disoriented. He hasn't spoken yet, and we don't know how much he remembers." Hannah didn't care. If he was alive, if there was even the smallest chance. "I need to see him," she whispered. The doctor gave her a small nod. "Go ahead." Hannah took a deep breath. Then she pushed open the door. The room was dim, quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. And there, lying in the bed, his small frame covered in a thin hospital blanket, was Caleb. Her world stopped. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. It was him. His dark hair, his little freckled nose, the tiny scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike. Her son. Alive. A strangled sob escaped her throat, and then Caleb's fingers twitched. Hannah froze. Slowly, so painfully slowly, his eyelids fluttered, and then his eyes opened. Their gazes met. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, in a hoarse, weak voice, "Mom?" Hannah's entire body collapsed as she burst into sobs. Caleb was alive, and he remembered her. Hannah couldn't breathe. The moment the word mom left Caleb's lips, her entire body crumbled. She staggered forward, barely able to hold herself together as tears streamed down her face. She reached out, afraid, so afraid, that if she touched him, he would disappear, that this was all some cruel dream. But when her fingers brushed his, he was real, warm, alive. A strangled sob broke from her chest. "Caleb," she whispered, barely able to speak through her tears. "Oh, my baby, my sweet boy." Caleb's eyes were unfocused, hazy with confusion, but he was looking right at her. His small hand trembled as it gripped hers, weak but desperate. "Mom?" His voice cracked, hoarse from disuse. His brow furrowed as if something wasn't right. "Why are you crying?" A broken laugh escaped her. "Because," she choked out, "I thought I lost you. I thought you were gone." His face scrunched up in confusion. His small fingers twitched against hers. "Gone?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Hannah cupped his face, her hands shaking. "You were in an accident, sweetheart. A really bad one. And they told me you didn't make it." She couldn't hold back her sobs anymore. I buried you, Caleb. I mourned you. And all this time, you were here." Caleb blinked slowly, his gaze distant, like he was trying to piece everything together. I don't remember." Hannah swallowed back the lump in her throat. "That's okay," she whispered, pressing a trembling kiss to his forehead. "It's okay, baby. You're here now. That's all that matters." Her son was alive. Alive. The weight of those words crashed down on her like a tidal wave. The months of grief, the nights of crying, the unbearable emptiness. All of it had been for nothing, because her boy was here, breathing, looking at her, holding her hand. She let out another sob, gripping his fingers like she would never let go again. But just as she was about to pull him into her arms, his body flinched. Hannah froze. His breathing hitched. His small chest rose and fell rapidly. "Caleb." Her voice was gentle, but a new fear crept into her heart. His fingers twitched violently. His eyes darted around the room, his body suddenly stiff. "Mom." His voice was barely a whisper. I don't understand." Hannah felt her stomach drop. "It's okay, sweetheart," she soothed, brushing his hair back. "You're safe. I'm here." But his breathing quickened, and then he started shaking. Panic exploded in Hannah's chest. "Doctor!" she screamed. The doctor rushed in just as Caleb's body convulsed. Hannah could do nothing but watch in horror as her son's body jerked uncontrollably, his eyes rolling back. The heart monitor screeched. "Get me a sedative now!" The doctor barked at the nurses who ran in behind him. "Caleb!" Hannah sobbed, gripping his hand, but he was slipping. His body was convulsing, his breaths erratic. A nurse injected something into his fore. Seconds passed. Then, his body stilled. His small chest rose and fell in deep, slow breaths. The heart monitor steadied. Hannah collapsed against the side of his bed, sobbing into the sheets. The doctor let out a slow breath, his expression grim. "What happened?" Hannah's voice trembled. The doctor placed a hand on her shoulder, his face filled with sympathy. "It was a trauma response," he said gently. "His brain is struggling to process everything. Seeing you. Remembering just enough, but not everything. It was too much." Hannah's hands shook. "Will he be okay?" The doctor hesitated. "We have to take this slow," he said carefully. "His body is still weak, and we don't know the full extent of his memory loss." Hannah wiped at her tears. "But he remembered me," she whispered. "He knew me." The doctor nodded. "Yes, and that's a good sign." He sighed. "But we have another problem." Hannah stiffened. "What?" The doctor folded his arms. "We need to find out who authorized his transfer here. Someone had to have signed the paperwork. His expression darkened. And if there was a cover-up, then we need to find out who didn't want you to know your son was alive. A shiver ran down Hannah's spine. Someone knew. Someone knew Caleb had survived. Someone had made sure she thought he was dead. And now, that someone was out there, waiting, watching. Her heart pounded. I need to know who did this, she whispered. The doctor nodded. Then we need to find his medical records. A sense of dread curled in her stomach. Something told her this was bigger than she ever could have imagined. But she would not stop. Not until she had the truth. And not until she knew that whoever had kept her son from her would pay. Hannah sat beside Caleb's hospital bed, her hands wrapped around his small fingers, her heart still racing from what had just happened. His chest rose and fell steadily now, his body finally at peace after the terrifying seizure. The machines beeped softly, a reminder that his fragile body was still fighting. But she couldn't shake the doctor's words. Someone knew. Someone made sure she thought her son was dead. Her stomach twisted. Why? Why would someone do this? And more importantly, who? The doctor cleared his throat, drawing her attention. His expression was calm but serious. Ms. Whitmore, I know you want answers. But I need you to prepare yourself. This could be complicated. Hannah's hands clenched into fists. I don't care how complicated it is. I need to know the truth. The doctor gave a slow nod. Then let's start with the medical records. He gestured for her to follow him, and even though she didn't want to leave Caleb's side, she knew this was the only way forward. With one last look at her son, she pressed a kiss to his forehead and whispered, I'll be right back, sweetheart. Then she turned and followed the doctor out of the room. The records office was on the lower level of the rehabilitation center. The hallway was dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs flickering slightly. The doctor swiped his keycard and led her inside. Stacks of files lined the walls, but he went straight to a computer. He typed quickly, his eyes scanning the screen. Hannah held her breath. Seconds passed. Then a frown creased the doctor's forehead. That's odd, he murmured. Hannah's pulse quickened. What? He turned to her, confusion in his eyes. His file is restricted. Hannah's stomach dropped. What do you mean, restricted? The doctor exhaled. It means someone put a lock on his records. Even as a physician, I can't access them without authorization. Hannah's hands clenched. Who can access them? The doctor hesitated. Someone with high clearance. A hospital administrator. Or, his voice trailed off. Or who? Hannah pressed. He rubbed his jaw. Or someone from law enforcement. Hannah's breath caught. Law enforcement? The doctor nodded. Yes. But that would mean... A knock at the door interrupted him. Both of them froze. The doctor exchanged a wary glance with her before slowly walking to the door. He cracked it open. And then, a deep voice rumbled. Dr. Reynolds, I need to speak with you. The doctor stiffened. Hannah couldn't see who it was, but every hair on the back of her neck stood up. There was something about that voice. Calm, cold, too controlled. About what? The doctor asked carefully. A pause. Then, Caleb Whitmore's file. Hannah's blood turned to ice. She took a step back, her heart pounding. The doctor hesitated before opening the door a little wider. A man stepped inside. Tall, dressed in a dark suit. Sharp eyes that held no warmth. His badge gleamed under the flickering fluorescent light. FBI. Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. The man's gaze landed on her instantly. He studied her for a moment, then spoke. Ms. Whitmore, we need to talk. Hannah's mind raced. Why was the FBI here? Why were Caleb's records locked? What was going on? The agent gestured toward a chair. Please sit down. She didn't move. I want to know what's going on right now, she demanded, her voice shaking. The agent sighed. Ms. Whitmore, I understand you have been through a lot, but there are things you don't know. Her jaw clenched. Then tell me. The agent glanced at the doctor. You should go. The doctor looked hesitant, but eventually nodded. I'll be right outside, he murmured before stepping out. The agent turned back to Hannah. Your son, he said slowly, was never meant to survive that night. A cold chill ran down her spine. Her mouth went dry. What do you mean? The agent studied her carefully. The accident wasn't just an accident, Ms. Whitmore. Hannah's legs felt weak. I don't understand. The agent exhaled. The car that hit him. The driver. He paused. It wasn't random. Hannah's heart slammed against her ribs. She shook her head. No, that's impossible. The police said it was a drunk driver. The agent's expression darkened. That's what they wanted you to believe. Hannah's breath came in short gasps. Someone had wanted her son dead. Someone had made sure she thought he was gone. Someone had locked his records. Her hands trembled. Who? She whispered. The agent hesitated. Then, in a voice so low it barely registered, he said, a man named Richard Hale. Hannah's stomach lurched. She had never heard that name before, but something told her. Her nightmare was only just beginning. Hannah's world spun. She gripped the edge of the desk behind her, her knuckles turning white. Her legs felt like they would give out. The FBI agent's words echoed in her mind. A man named Richard Hale. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. Who is he? She whispered. The agent's expression didn't change. He's a dangerous man, Ms. Whitmore. And whether you know it or not, your son was caught in something much bigger than you can imagine. Hannah shook her head violently. No, that's not possible. Caleb is just a kid. He's just a kid. The agent didn't blink. And that's exactly why this is so terrifying. A cold chill crept up Hannah's spine. What do you mean? She forced out. The agent leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes, something dark. Richard Hale is not just some random man. He's a high-level player in a criminal network that we've been trying to take down for years. Hannah shook her head. None of this made sense. But what does that have to do with my son? She demanded. The agent's jaw tightened. We believe Caleb saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Hannah's stomach clenched. What? The agent hesitated. Then, finally, he sighed. Do you remember exactly where Caleb was the night of the accident? Hannah frowned, her thoughts spinning back to that night. It had been an ordinary evening, nothing unusual. I was at work, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb was playing at the park with his friends. He was supposed to come straight home. The agent nodded. And did he? Hannah's brows furrowed. I don't know. He never made it home. The agent exchanged a glance with someone through the glass window. Then he pulled something out of his pocket. A photograph. He placed it on the desk in front of her. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. It was a grainy security camera image. A parking lot. And standing at the edge of the frame was Caleb. Hannah's hand flew to her mouth. The timestamp on the image was from that night. Caleb had been somewhere else before the accident. But where? Her heart slammed against her ribs. Where is this? She asked, her voice shaking. The agent's eyes darkened. A warehouse. A few miles from your home. It belongs to Richard Hale. Hannah's stomach dropped. No, she whispered. That's not possible. Why would Caleb be there? The agent exhaled. That's what we've been trying to figure out. Hannah shook her head violently. There has to be a mistake. The agent gave her a look filled with sympathy. I wish there was. Hannah felt like she couldn't breathe. Her sweet boy. Her soccer-loving, playful, innocent Caleb. What had he seen? And why had someone tried to make sure he never came back? A lump formed in her throat. Did he? Her voice cracked. Did he say anything? Does he remember? The agent's jaw clenched. We don't know yet. Hannah let out a shaky breath, her mind racing. But someone else does, the agent continued. Hannah's head snapped up. What? The agent leaned forward. Ms. Whitmore, someone went to great lengths to erase your son's existence. Someone transferred him, locked his records, and wanted you to believe he was dead. Hannah shivered. And whoever that person is, the agent said, his voice grave, they won't stop just because you found him. The weight of those words sank into Hannah's bones. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. She clenched her fists. I want to see Caleb, she whispered. The agent hesitated, then nodded. Let's go. Back in Caleb's hospital room, Hannah sat beside her son, brushing his hair back gently. His face was pale, his small body still weak, but he was here, alive. That was all that mattered. For now. His tiny fingers twitched. Then, in a hoarse whisper, "Mom?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I'm here, sweetheart." Caleb swallowed, his throat dry. His lips trembled. I saw something." Hannah's heart stopped. Her body tensed. "What, baby?" she whispered, her fingers tightening around his. Caleb's lips parted, his brows furrowed, like he was struggling to remember. Then, a single tear slipped down his cheek, and in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "They don't want me to tell." Hannah's blood ran cold. Her grip on his hand tightened. "Who?" she whispered. Caleb's breathing quickened. His small fingers clutched hers desperately. "The man," he rasped. "The one with the scar." Hannah's stomach twisted. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She turned to the agent, fear flooding her veins. But before she could speak, a loud crash echoed outside the hospital room. Then, the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. And in the silence, Hannah heard the one thing that made her entire body freeze. The sound of heavy footsteps. Coming closer. The footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Hannah's heart slammed against her ribs. She couldn't see anything in the darkness. The sudden loss of power had swallowed the room whole. The only light came from the faint glow of Caleb's heart monitor, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The agent was already moving. She heard the click of a gun being drawn. "Stay quiet," he whispered. Hannah swallowed hard, gripping Caleb's hand. His small fingers trembled against hers. Then, another sound. Not footsteps. Something metallic, like a door handle being tested. The agent moved to the doorway, his silhouette barely visible. "Lock the door," he murmured to Hannah. She fumbled in the darkness, reaching for the door. Her fingers found the latch, and she turned it just in time. A loud bang rattled the door. Hannah jumped, her breath catching in her throat. Someone was outside. Someone who wanted in. She turned to Caleb, who was now fully awake, his wide eyes filled with fear. "Mom," he whimpered. Hannah pressed a shaking finger to his lips. "Shoo, baby. Stay quiet." The agent pressed himself against the wall near the door, his gun raised. "Hannah, take Caleb and get back." Another bang. The door shuddered violently. Whoever was on the other side wasn't knocking anymore. They were trying to break in. The agent's jaw tightened. "They're not here for me," he muttered. "They're here for him." Hannah's blood ran cold. They were here for Caleb. Before she could process it, the agent moved. In one swift motion, he yanked the door open. A man lunged inside. Hannah barely saw his face before the agent grabbed him, twisting his arm. A gunshot rang out, deafening in the small room. She ducked, shielding Caleb with her body. The agent moved fast. A second later, there was a sickening crack, followed by a grunt of pain. Then, silence. Hannah risked a glance. The intruder was on the floor, unconscious. The agent kicked his gun away, then turned to Hannah, his face set in stone. "We need to move. Now." Hannah didn't hesitate. She scooped Caleb up, ignoring the burning in her muscles. He was weak, too weak to walk. The agent grabbed the unconscious man's radio, flipping it on. Static crackled before a low voice came through. "Report. Do you have the target?" Hannah's stomach twisted. Target. They were talking about her son. The agent clicked the radio off. "We're not safe here. There's more of them." Hannah's breath came in ragged gasps. "Who are they?" The agent's jaw tightened. "People who don't want the truth getting out." She didn't need more details. Not now. Not while they were still in danger. The agent moved to the window, peering through the blinds. Then, his body tensed. "Damn it." Hannah's chest clenched. "What?" The agent turned to her, his voice sharp. "They have the exits covered." A new kind of fear settled into Hannah's bones. They were trapped. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Only the sound of their breathing filled the room. Then, Caleb spoke. His voice was soft, unsteady. "There's another way out." Hannah's eyes snapped to him. "What?" Caleb licked his dry lips. "When I was little, I got scared here once. A nurse showed me a secret way out." Hannah's heart pounded. "Where, baby?" Caleb's gaze flickered toward the far wall. "Behind there." Hannah followed his eyes. A supply closet. The agent moved first, pulling the door open. It was small, cramped with shelves of medical supplies. But at the back, a vent. The agent turned to Caleb. Where does it lead? Caleb swallowed. I think, to the maintenance hall. The agent didn't hesitate. He pulled out a knife and pried the vent cover off. It was small, narrow, but big enough for Caleb. And maybe Hannah. The agent's gaze locked onto Hannah's. You go first. I'll cover you. Hannah's pulse thundered in her ears. She nodded and climbed into the vent, pulling Caleb into her lap. It was tight, dark, and smelled of dust. She crawled forward, gripping Caleb tightly. Behind her, the agent secured the vent cover back in place. Then, they started moving. The vent was suffocatingly small. Each movement was slow, agonizing. But they kept going. Hannah forced herself to stay calm, to keep going. For Caleb, minutes passed. Then, she saw light ahead. The end of the tunnel. She pushed forward, reaching the vent cover. Carefully, she peered through. The maintenance hall, empty. Relief flooded her. She shoved the cover off and pulled Caleb out. Then she turned back. The agent crawled out behind them, brushing dust off his suit. We're clear, he muttered. Hannah barely had time to catch her breath before he grabbed his radio again. This is Agent Carter. We have the package. I need an evac. A brief silence. Then, copy that. 5 minutes. Hannah held Caleb close. The agent turned to her. There's a safe house. We'll take him there. You'll be protected. Hannah's lips trembled. And then, Agent Carter's eyes darkened. Then we find out who did this to your son. Hannah took a shaky breath. She wasn't ready for the truth. But she would be. Because whoever tried to take Caleb from her, whoever wanted him dead, was about to find out just how far a mother would go to protect her child. And she wouldn't stop. Not until she had justice. The black SUV sped down the empty highway, its headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. Hannah sat in the back seat, gripping Caleb tightly, her heart still racing. He was alive. She had him. But the danger was far from over. Agent Carter, his hands steady on the wheel, hadn't spoken in minutes. His face was hard, his eyes sharp as he checked the rearview mirror every few seconds. Are we being followed? Hannah finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Carter's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Not yet. But they won't stop looking. Hannah's stomach twisted. She glanced down at Caleb. He had fallen asleep against her, his tiny fingers still curled around her arm. He was exhausted. His body was weak. But at least he was here. She brushed his hair back gently, her heart aching. Where are we going? Carter's voice was low. A safe house. A place where they won't find you. Hannah swallowed hard. And then, Carter's jaw clenched. Then we find out who's behind this. Hannah shivered. You already said a name. Richard Hale.
Yes.
She hesitated. Who is he? Carter's grip on the wheel tightened. You ever heard of the syndicate? Hannah frowned.
No.
Carter exhaled sharply. They don't want you to. They operate in the shadows. Money laundering, trafficking, arms deals. But they're careful, smart, almost untouchable. A cold chill ran down Hannah's spine. And this? Hale? He's one of them? Carter's expression darkened. Not just one of them. He's the one. A ghost. No photos. No paper trail. But we know he's the one pulling the strings. Hannah swallowed, gripping Caleb tighter. But what does he have to do with my son? Carter hesitated. Then, finally, he spoke. We think Caleb saw something. Something he wasn't supposed to see. Hannah's heart pounded. Like what? Carter's eyes flickered to her in the rearview mirror. A murder. Hannah's breath caught. Her arms instinctively tightened around Caleb. No, she whispered. That can't be. Carter's voice was grim. I wish I was wrong. But that warehouse we found him near? It wasn't just a storage facility. It was a drop site. A place where the syndicate cleans up their messes. Hannah shook her head, panic rising in her chest. But Caleb, he's just a kid. He wouldn't. Carter cut her off. Kids see things all the time. They don't always understand, but they see. And the syndicate? They don't take chances. Hannah's body went ice cold. That meant they had tried to kill Caleb. They had almost succeeded. And now, they knew he was alive. Her stomach twisted painfully. Caleb shifted against her, stirring slightly. His eyelids fluttered, but he didn't wake. A surge of rage flooded her veins. Someone had done this. Someone had hurt her child. And whoever it was, they weren't going to get away with it. Not if she had anything to do with it. The safe house was hidden deep in the woods, miles away from the city. A small cabin, old but sturdy. The kind of place no one would look twice at. Carter parked the SUV and turned to Hannah. We don't have much time. Inside. Now. Hannah didn't argue. She carried Caleb out of the car, his small body limp against her shoulder. Carter scanned the area, his gun drawn. Only after a long pause did he nod. Clear. They stepped inside. It was small. A living room, a kitchen, 2 bedrooms. Nothing fancy, but it was safe. For now, Carter locked the door behind them. You'll stay here until I can figure out our next move. Hannah laid Caleb down on the couch, brushing his hair back. He barely stirred. Then she turned to Carter, fire in her eyes. I'm not just hiding, she said. I want to know everything. Carter studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. You deserve the truth. He grabbed his phone and tapped the screen. A few seconds later, he handed it to her. Recognize this man? Hannah's breath hitched. On the screen was a grainy security photo. A man in a black coat, a scar running down his jaw. His face was shadowed, but his presence was unmistakably menacing. Hannah's knees almost buckled. Caleb's words echoed in her mind. The man, the one with the scar. Her hand trembled as she pointed to the photo. That's him. Carter's face darkened. That's Richard Hale's right-hand man. They call him Vance. Hannah swallowed hard. He's the one who tried to. She couldn't even finish the sentence. Carter nodded. And then, in a voice colder than ice, he said, and if he knows Caleb is still alive, he's coming. Hannah's pulse thundered in her ears. Then we have to stop him, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Carter studied her. We will. But we have to be smart about it. Hannah's hands curled into fists. I want him to pay. Carter nodded slowly. He will. A tense silence filled the cabin. Then, a ping sounded from Carter's phone. His eyes flicked to the screen, and instantly, his face went pale. What? Hannah asked, panic rising. Carter turned the screen toward her. Her heart stopped. It was a message. From an unknown number. A video file. Carter hesitated, then tapped play. The screen lit up, and Hannah felt pure terror slam into her chest, because on the screen, standing in the middle of a dimly lit warehouse, was Vance, and he was smiling. Then he spoke. You should have left the boy dead. The screen cut to black. Hannah's blood ran cold. A silence thicker than death filled the room. Then Carter spoke. They know. Hannah's breath hitched. And outside the cabin, somewhere deep in the trees, a branch snapped. Someone was here. And the nightmare wasn't over yet. The snap of the branch sent ice-cold fear through Hannah's veins. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Carter was already in motion. He pulled his gun from his holster and moved to the window, pressing himself against the wall as he peered outside. His entire body was tense, coiled like a spring ready to snap. Hannah clutched Caleb against her chest. Her son stirred slightly, but he didn't wake. Outside, the night was eerily still. No wind, no crickets, just silence. Too much silence. Then, another sound. A footstep. Soft, careful, but not careful enough. Carter glanced at Hannah, his voice a whisper. They're here. Hannah's blood ran cold. How? She choked out. We were so careful. Carter's jaw tightened. They must have followed us from the hospital. Panic clawed at Hannah's chest. What do we do? Carter's eyes flicked to Caleb, then to the back door. We get you out. Hannah's breath hitched. And you? Carter's gaze was hard. I'll buy you time. Hannah froze. No, she whispered. Listen to me, Hannah. Carter's voice was low but urgent. You have to run. Take Caleb. Get to the backup car in the shed. The keys are inside. Drive north. Do not stop. Do not look back. Hannah shook her head violently. I'm not leaving you to die. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. I can handle myself. A new sound. Closer. A click. A gun being cocked. Hannah's pulse skyrocketed. Carter turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Then, in one swift motion, he pulled a second gun from his holster and pressed it into her hand. Do you know how to use this? Hannah's fingers curled around the cold metal. She had never held a gun before, but right now, she was willing to learn. She gave a small nod. Tell me what to do. Carter's mouth twitched. Respect. He pointed toward the back door. You have exactly 90 seconds before they breach the front. Get Caleb out that door. Stay low. Move fast. And if anyone gets in your way. His eyes darkened. You shoot. Hannah swallowed hard. She wasn't a killer. She wasn't a fighter. But she was a mother. And she would do anything to protect her son. She nodded. Okay. Carter exhaled, then turned toward the front door. His muscles tensed. Then, a sudden boom shattered the silence. The front door exploded inward. Wood splintered. Glass shattered. And standing in the doorway, gun in hand, eyes like death, was Vance. His scarred face twisted into a cruel smirk. Found you. Hannah ran. She bolted through the back door, Caleb in her arms. Her feet barely touched the ground as she sprinted toward the shed. Behind her, gunfire erupted. Carter was fighting, buying her time. She pushed forward, every muscle screaming. The shed was just ahead. Almost there. Almost. A shadow moved. To her left. Too fast. Someone was waiting. A man in black stepped out from behind the trees, raising a gun. Hannah's stomach dropped. No. Her body moved before she could think. She lifted the gun Carter gave her. Her hands shook, but she pulled the trigger. The gunshot split the air. The man stumbled. A dark red stain bloomed across his chest. He dropped. Dead. Hannah gasped for breath, her hands trembling violently. She had never killed before, but there was no time to process it. More footsteps. More men. She yanked open the shed door, throwing herself inside. The old backup car sat in the center, its keys dangling from the ignition just as Carter had promised. She shoved Caleb inside. The boy whimpered, his body weak, his head pressing against her shoulder. Hannah slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine roared to life. Then, a bullet shattered the back window. Hannah ducked, her heart slamming against her ribs. They were closing in. She slammed her foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, tires spitting dirt. They crashed through the shed doors, bursting into the open road. More gunshots. More voices. But she kept going. Faster. 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 Caleb groaned weakly. Mom. Hannah's hands clenched around the wheel. It's okay, baby, she whispered. But it wasn't okay. Not yet. Not until they were safe. She stole a glance in the rearview mirror. Her blood turned to ice. Two black SUVs had pulled onto the road. They were chasing her. She pressed the gas harder. The car sped forward, the road stretching into darkness. Her breath came in short gasps. They weren't going to stop. They would chase her to the ends of the earth. Unless she stopped them first. Her fingers tightened around the wheel. She wasn't just running. She was fighting back. She turned to Caleb. Baby, she said softly. His tired eyes flickered open. I need you to hold on. Then, she swerved off the road. The car lurched. Dirt and gravel kicked up. The black SUVs followed. They were gaining. Hannah's mind raced. Then, she saw it. A steep drop ahead. A cliff. A plan formed in her head. Crazy. Reckless. But it was their only chance. She took a deep breath. Then, she slammed the brakes. The car skidded violently. The SUVs behind her were moving too fast. They didn't have time to react. Hannah threw her arm over Caleb, shielding him. And then, the first SUV went over the edge. The second SUV screeched, trying to stop. Too late. It plunged into darkness. The crash echoed through the night. Then, silence. Hannah's breath came in ragged gasps. They were gone. She turned to Caleb, pressing a trembling kiss to his forehead. We did it, baby, she whispered. We're safe. But just as she said the words, a shadow moved in the darkness. and stepping out of the wreckage was Vance. His suit was torn. Blood dripped from his forehead, but he was still standing, and in his hand, a gun, pointed straight at them. Hannah's blood ran cold. The nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. Vance wiped the blood trickling from his forehead, his hand steady as a rock. His suit was torn, his face smeared with dirt, but his eyes, those cold, merciless eyes, locked onto Hannah with terrifying precision. His gun was aimed directly at her. Hannah's breath came in ragged gasps. She had no weapon, no escape. Caleb whimpered in the passenger seat, too weak to move. She had seconds to decide what to do. Vance took a slow step forward. "You should have stayed hidden, Whitmore." His voice was calm, almost amused. Hannah's pulse thundered. She gripped the steering wheel, her hands shaking. "I should have buried you when I had the chance," Vance continued. His finger hovered over the trigger. Hannah's body coiled like a spring. Then, she threw the car into reverse. The tires screeched against the dirt. The car jerked backward, gravel flying. Vance fired. The windshield exploded. Glass shattered around her, but she didn't stop. Another shot, this time grazing the side of the car. Hannah yanked the wheel hard, sending the vehicle into a sharp spin. The back tires slid wildly. Vance dodged, but he was too slow. The car clipped him, knocking him to the ground. Hannah didn't hesitate. She slammed the brakes, threw the gear into drive, and hit the gas. The car roared forward, tires digging into the dirt. She had one goal: get Caleb out of here. But in the rearview mirror, Vance was already moving. How? The man was unstoppable. He raised his gun again. Hannah's breath caught. Then, a second gunshot rang out. Not from Vance. From behind him. Vance stumbled. His gun slipped from his hand. A voice shouted in the darkness. Hannah's heart leapt. "Agent Carter." Vance turned sharply, his face twisting in rage. Blood seeped from his shoulder where the bullet had struck. Carter stepped into the open, his own gun raised. "You lose, Vance," he said coolly. Vance's lips curled into a sneer. "You wish." Then, with a flick of his wrist, Vance pulled something from his jacket. A knife. He lunged. Carter fired, but Vance was too fast. The knife slashed. Carter staggered back, blood blooming across his side. Hannah screamed. Vance grabbed him, slamming him to the ground. Then he turned to Hannah. His eyes burned with something vicious. "You and your kid," he spat, "are dead." Hannah's body moved before she could think. She reached for Carter's fallen gun. Her fingers wrapped around the grip. Vance saw it. He lunged. Hannah fired. The bullet struck his leg. He roared in pain, collapsing onto his knee. Hannah scrambled to her feet, breathing hard. The gun shook in her hands. Vance clutched his leg, his face twisted in rage. But he laughed. A dark, cruel sound. "You think this is over?" he rasped. Hannah's grip tightened on the gun. "Not even close." His lips curled into a bloody grin. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Hannah's stomach clenched. Vance knew something. Something bigger. She didn't want to hear it. Didn't care. Her son was safe. That was all that mattered. Behind her, Caleb stirred. His weak voice whispered, "Mom?" Hannah's eyes burned with fury. She leveled the gun at Vance's head. "Stay away from my son." Vance's grin didn't waver. Then, from the distance, sirens. Loud. Getting closer. Vance's expression shifted. His eyes darted to the road, to the sound of reinforcements. His jaw clenched. For the first time, he looked worried. Carter groaned from the ground, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. Hannah kept the gun trained on Vance. Then, with one last snarl, he made his choice. He ran. Into the trees. Disappearing into the night. The sirens wailed. Hannah stood frozen, heart racing. Caleb coughed weakly behind her. She turned and dropped the gun, rushing to him. "Baby," she sobbed, pulling him into her arms. "I'm okay, Mom," he whispered. She kissed his forehead, rocking him gently. The sirens grew louder. Headlights cut through the night. And finally, the nightmare was over. Or so she thought. Half an hour later, the safe house was flooded with agents. Paramedics tended to Carter's wound. Hannah sat in the back of an ambulance, cradling Caleb, refusing to let him go. Agent Carter limped toward her, a bandage wrapped around his side. "You did good, Whitmore," he said. Hannah exhaled sharply. "He got away." Carter nodded grimly. "For now." She looked down at Caleb, brushing his hair back. "Will he come back?" Carter hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Not if we get to him first." Hannah met his gaze. There was no fear left in her, only determination. She had spent months mourning her son. She had spent months broken, believing she had lost everything. But now, she was stronger, and she wasn't going to run anymore. She turned to Carter, her voice steady. "Then let's finish this." The cold morning air settled over the safe house as the last of the emergency responders packed up. The flashing lights had faded, and the hum of agents discussing next steps filled the quiet woods. Hannah sat on the back step of the cabin, cradling Caleb in her arms. He had finally fallen into a deep sleep, his small body curled against her chest. He was safe. For now. Agent Carter stood nearby, his hands in his pockets, watching her carefully. He had a new bandage on his side, but he looked more determined than ever. "You don't have to be involved in this anymore," he said. "We can put you and Caleb in witness protection. New names. New lives. They'd never find you." Hannah exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Vance was still out there. Richard Hale was still out there. And if they thought she would just disappear, they didn't know who they were dealing with. She shook her head. "I'm not running." Carter studied her. "It won't be easy. These people don't stop." Hannah's grip on Caleb tightened. "They tried to take my son from me," she said softly. "They tried to erase him." She turned to Carter, her eyes burning with something fierce. "They don't get to walk away from that." Carter gave her a slow nod. "Then we go after them." Hannah let out a shaky breath. "I need to know everything," she said. "Every detail. Every name." Carter hesitated. Then he pulled out a thin file from inside his jacket. He handed it to her. She opened it with trembling fingers. The first thing she saw, a surveillance photo of Richard Hale. It was grainy, but it was him. A tall man in an expensive suit. Slicked back hair. Cold, calculating eyes. Her stomach twisted. This was the man who had tried to take Caleb's life. She turned the page. More photos. More notes. A list of names. And then, her blood went cold. Her breath caught in her throat. Because there, near the bottom of the page, she saw a name she recognized. A name that didn't belong. A name that made her entire body freeze. Carter noticed the change in her face. "What is it?" Hannah swallowed hard. "This name," she whispered. "I know this name." Carter frowned and glanced at the file. "Who?" Hannah's fingers hovered over the page. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is the officer who told me my son was dead." Carter's entire expression shifted. "What?" Hannah nodded, her hands shaking. "The man who came to my door that night. The one who gave me Caleb's death certificate." She looked up, her stomach twisting. "He's on this list." Carter swore under his breath. "That means..." "He was working for them," Hannah finished, her voice shaking with rage. "He helped cover it up." Carter grabbed his phone. "We need to move. Now." Hannah's pulse pounded. The pieces were finally fitting together. And now, she had something she hadn't had before. A name. A target. A chance to fight back. She stood slowly, shifting Caleb in her arms. For the first time in months, she didn't feel helpless. She felt ready. She kissed Caleb's forehead, whispering a silent promise. No one would ever take him from her again. Then she turned to Carter. "Let's end this." Carter nodded. And together, they stepped into the unknown. Not as victims, but as the ones who would win.